We are good to go. Hey everyone, my name is Christopher Gomez, and I'm doing this video while in quarantine from the whole coronavirus outbreak. And I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy and following directions and keeping social distancing. With that being said, being that I'm in quarantine with the coronavirus outbreak that's going on, I think it'd be a good opportunity to talk about a certain subgenre of film, in particular the zombie virus outbreak films. Now, first of all, I want to apologize for the low production values. I transported all of my editing software to my apartment in Burbank, and then when the outbreak and the lockdown happened, I came back to my parents' house in Chino. And so all of my editing stuff is over there. That being said, the other thing that I wanted to mention is that I'm only going to be covering the films that I own physical copies of. And one of the reasons that I'm doing this is to kind of narrow down the the movies that I'm going to be talking about, because there's so many streaming services out there. This subgenre of film, there's dozens of films to cover, and I thought just to kind of narrow it down and condense it a bit, I'll just talk about the ones that I own physical copies of. For the ones that if there's a particular film that I don't mention, you can download them. There's so many streaming services such as YouTube and Netflix and Hulu and whatnot. So the first film that I'm going to be talking about is a movie starring Vincent Price called The Last Man on Earth. Now, The Last Man on Earth is a film that is based on a novel by Richard Matheson called I Am Legend. Now, most of you know I Am Legend as a movie that came out about 10 years ago starring Will Smith. It's adapted from the same book. Now, the original novel came out in 1954, and the inspiration, have my own personal copy of the novel right here. Now, the inspiration for I Am Legend came about when Richard Matheson had gone to see a screening of Dracula when he was a little kid. It was the Bela Lugosi Dracula. And he thought to himself, if one vampire was scary, what would happen if the entire world was overrun by vampires? And that is a direct quote that you could find here in this issue of Fangoria number 145 in a retrospective about I Am Legend. And what's cool about that particular retrospective is that it covers not just The Last Man on Earth, but also the subsequent adaptations such as The Omega Man starring Charlton Heston. Now, for a quick breakdown of what the movie's about, a mysterious plague has rendered Earth's population, it decimates Earth's population. And there's one character by the name of Robert Neville who seems to be the last man on Earth. And every night he is hounded by hordes of vampires that are howling and screaming out his name for him to come out. For some reason, Robert Neville is immune to this mysterious plague that has wiped out all of humanity. We find out later in the novel that it's possible that that it was brought about by germ warfare and limited nuclear exchange. Now, the novel came out in 1954. The first film adaptation did not come out until 1964. And originally, the film was going to be a somewhat faithful adaptation to the novel, and it was going to be done by Hammer Studios. It was going to be a Hammer film. Now, to the uninitiated, at this point in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s, Hammer Studios was a film production company in Great Britain that had garnered a lot of notoriety for producing these really vibrant color versions, color remakes of classic horror characters such as Dracula and Frankenstein, the Mummy, and so on. And a lot of those films had introduced the world to Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing and Michael Gough and like all those like great horror actors from Great Britain. And for whatever reason, through several permutations, they lost the rights, and eventually I Am Legend no longer became a Hammer film, and a producer from American International bought the rights, and on the cheap was able to produce a version of the film, but to save costs they shot it in Rome, in Italy. And also popular at the time was Vincent Price, who, you know, was also a big name within the horror film area, and they had signed him on to do this film. Now they changed a few character names. Vincent Price's character, instead of Robert Neville, his name is Robert Morgan. There is still the character of Ben, who's in the novel, a co-worker that eventually turns into one of the vampires that's calling out his name. The book is a great read. I highly recommend it. I'm currently recording an audio version of it right now. I also recommend checking out the Vincent Price movie because of the 3 film adaptations, it's probably the closest version to Richard Matheson's novel. And that's not saying much. Being that Vincent Price is the only American actor and this film was shot in Italy, it's painfully obvious. The production values are somewhat low, and you could tell that all of the supporting actors are Italian because they're obviously overdubbed with English-speaking actors. Nevertheless, there are moments in this particular film that stick out that is worth a watch. For instance, there's a particular scene that sticks out where Vincent Price is watching an old home movie of his family, of his daughter's birthday, and he's watching this film, and the camera's on him the whole time. He's laughing, reminiscing about the good times with his family, and in that same shot, in that same sequence, his laughter all of a sudden turns into hysterical crying and sobbing. And it's a neat little example of Vincent Price's range as an actor. He's not just like the creepy, lecherous dude. Another thing that also stuck out too was, spoiler alert, the ending of both the novel and this particular film. Vincent Price's character, the Robert Neville character, realizes that he has become the thing that the vampires are afraid of, because during the day he would go out and hunt them down while they were asleep. And in the end, you find out that his presence is kind of like this urban myth that the vampires are afraid of him, and that's one of the reasons why they're going after him. And Vincent Price has this, like, it's a brief line towards the end of the film, but he has the way how he delivers the line, they were afraid of me, is gut wrenching. And those are, there are moments that elevate this movie to a status, to a higher caliber than it should be. Another cool thing about this film is that the vampires are kind of presented almost what we now deem as zombie looking. And this film would be a great double feature with George Romero's Night of the Living Dead. They're both in black and white. They have that same similar gritty look, and even the zombies and the vampires kind of look, they look alike. It has a little bit of that noirish kind of look to it. It's a great double bill. And the other thing too is that George Romero has been quoted as saying that the story of I Am Legend, and possibly this film as well, inspired him to, come up with Night of the Living Dead. In a sense, it's kind of the same premise. A virus breaks out, and people have to barricade themselves in a home while finding a resolution to the problem. Check it out. I also recommend reading the book. None of the movies do the book justice. And to the uninitiated, I also recommend checking out Richard Matheson's other works. Now, Richard Matheson is one of those authors that he's primarily focused in horror / fantasy, and every now and then he'll kind of bend that genre a little bit. So he's known for doing these stories like I Am Legend, The Incredible Shrinking Man, and he also wrote the novels for Somewhere in Time and What Dreams May Come. He also wrote 6 episodes of the original Twilight Zone, including some of the most memorable ones, like I think The Invaders and Nightmare at 20,000 Feet with William Shatner, where he sees the gremlin on the wing of the airplane. So check it out. And I think, speaking of the physical copies that I own, ideally what I would like to do is I would like to go into the Omega Man next, since it is the next film adaptation of this particular story. But unfortunately, I do not have a physical copy of the Omega Man. So I'll have to skip that one. I do have I Am Legend, so I will be covering that. And I think the next film I will be covering is George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, the original 1968 version. Black and white, inglorious black and white. Until then, practice safe social distancing, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.